Hello and welcome to At the 55, your home for OUA football. Me and Tom are back on the mics breaking down week 9, the final week of the 2024 OUA regular season. Tom, it's been a heck of a ride. We were talking about some of the historical numbers going into world at the end of the year and comparing with other seasons and just what a year it's been. We'll break down all these games. We'll have a little conversation about maybe some possible award winners, but pushing that maybe to a pod to come. But first and foremost, Tom, how the heck you doing, my friend?
I'm doing well, my man. I'm doing well. It's sad to think that there are a number of teams in the OUA that their seasons have come to an end, but kudos and salute to every one of them because my goodness, were we greeted with some outstanding football this entire year. You and I were going through the numbers, and this is something we'll get into, I think, a little later on, but we're taking a look at some of the numbers from the quarterback and ratings, and we're saying, hey, you know what? Quarterbacks aren't throwing for as many yards as they were. And our guy in Nate Hobbs and the things that he was doing really is what stuck out to us. But I think the big change that's happening, and we were talking about this, is that there's fewer and fewer blowout games. I mean, this entire year in the OUA, there was only two, both of them at the hands of the Western Mustangs. Shock, surprise, surprise. But still, I think there's more competition top to bottom. There's more defense. There's more outstanding coaches than there has been. This is some of the best football that you and I have ever seen in the OUA.
Yeah, I think that's the proper read on it because we're certainly not at a lack of talent at the individual positions by any means. And I think that, yeah, when you look at it in terms of what these teams have been doing year in, year out, it just across the board, it's becoming just such a powerhouse. And that's the proof of that pudding is also in just look at all the talent that's being put out of the OUA year in and year out. And it's no doubt going to continue that way. Speaking of that talent, before we break down the full 5 slate of games we had in week 9, let's do our shout outs and our players of the week, starting on the offensive side of the ball. Tom, where are we going with this one?
Number of really awesome outings, including one from our guy in Melchus Alunga, close to 200 yards of all-purpose between running and passing, along with a touchdown. But when you look at the dominance that was happening on the field and in the air, it's not going to a quarterback this time. It's going to a receiver. Ethan Jordan, 10 catches, 225 yards and 2 touchdowns. He is our offensive player of the week. This man has been playing unbelievably all year long.
It's crazy. And we were having a conversation beforehand as we were kind of alluding to speaking about who might take home MVPs this year. And the easy, obvious pick, and it's a great pick if it is where it goes, is Taylor Elgersma back-to-back. We detailed it earlier in the season to be the first back-to-back MVP in around 20 years since Tommy Dennison did it and just time slinging the ball for the Golden Gales. But our last non-quarterback MVP was, of course, Keon Edwards. The last receiver MVP was another Laurier Goldenhawk in Curly Gittens Jr. in his 2017 campaign, where he puts up a disgusting 75 receptions. Like, that is bananas. Almost 10 receptions a game, 953 yards and 6 touchdowns. And he adds in a good chunk of production in the return game. But you brought up what Ethan Jordan did in this game alone. On the season, he's number 1 in receptions in the OUA with 59. He is at a clean 1,000 yards reception, 1,000, no rounding whatsoever, and 10 touchdowns. It's bananas. I think we'll save more of that conversation, but like, let's just put it out there right now. Like, hey, number 4, give me more. Like Ethan Jordan for MVP, maybe. I love it, but a hell of a game for him right there, and no doubt it's going to continue with him. On the defensive side of the ball, you gave the shout out to Melchus Alunga in that York game against McMaster. We're going to go back to that one, and no shout out here. Well, I don't know. I'll give a quick shout out here on the Max side of things, the team that won and got their ticket stamped to the playoffs. Our guy in Drake Bodie, 5.5 tackles, 2 sacks, 2 tackles for loss, and a forced fumble. But we're going to the other side of the ball, to the guy who we've been just loving what he's been doing all year long, and that we were lucky enough to get to meet. Seen him back on the field for the York Lions after a bit of an injury, a bit of a hamstring. Number 28 in Brody Clark, 10.5 tackles, 2 sacks, 2 TFLs. I don't know if they differentiate between those, but just flying all over the field and seemingly unstoppable in this one.
Yeah, every time we seemingly saw a McMaster offensive player get tackled, it was like, oh yeah, it's 28. That's Brody Clark again. And even if he's not making the tackle, he's right by the ball, either influencing where the running back or the receiver is going, or just straight up making the tackle himself. He was outstanding in this game. And that York defense in general, the linebacker play, we'll get into it when we break down the game, but my goodness, that was some of the best linebacker play we've seen all year.
It truly was. It was a great day for those York Lions in spite of the loss. One more to give out on the special team side of the ball. We're going back to an old familiar name from this year. Where are we going, Tom?
He doesn't have a major on the game this time, but every time this man touches the ball, he is dangerous. It's going to our guy in Ian St. Arnaud, kick returner for the Queens Golden Gales. He finishes with 309 total return yards, 106 on kickoff returns, and 203 on punt returns. He's an outstanding player. My goodness, is he's really, really coming into his own in this Queens team. But the thing that I really wanted to call out here once again, and anytime we get a chance to, I always want to be able to shout out our guy in Charlie Taggart, special teams coordinator for the Queens Gales, because when you watch that special teams on Queens, while yes, obviously your eye is drawn to Ian St. Arnaud and all the amazing things that he is doing, but you watch all of the blockers out and around him. And not only are they blocking well, but they're in good football positions. There's no worries about them getting a holding call or a block in the back or anything, for the most part, at least. This is a very well coached special teams unit in all facets of it. So I want to give a shout out to our guy in Charlie Taggart. He has done an outstanding job with the Queens Golden Gales special teams units. Really, really been impressive.
He certainly has. Charlie, we're also trying to buddy you up so the next time we see you live at a game, you'll actually give us some dirt on what's going on inside that building, because they keep it under lock and key with those Queens Golden Gales. But hey, it clearly works for them because they got a good thing going on in on that side of things. Those are our players of the week. Let's dive into the action. We had 5 1 o'clock games by the order of operations in the on the OUA website. We're going to take a trip down to the nation's capital where the Ottawa Gee-Gees, coming off the bye week following that incredible win in the Panda game, come up victorious against the U of T Blues. Final score in this game, Ottawa 49, U of T 7. Tom, a game that we were detailing going into week 9 as the game where, wow, if Ottawa drops this one, then that opens up this whole can of worms, or Ottawa might not even make the playoffs. And then we get into these tie break scenarios, and then and it's like, whenever it was during our lovely time at Ron Joy Stadium watching Mac York, where, it probably just dawned on us, hey, a wise man once said, keep it simple, stupid, because my goodness, like from what we'd been seeing with these clubs going into this one, we probably, though it was an absolute joy of a time going through all those scenarios, probably overthought those tiebreak scenarios, because really, Ottawa, it's one thing when a team plays a lesser opponent and you just see them roll them and just like by every form or fashion. What was so great was that Ottawa in this one, they do all the things that in the weeks leading up to this, we've been seeing them do so well. Josh Jansen, 17 for 19, a touchdown, 289 in the air. Our king and Charles Asselin, 18 carries for 104, no touchdowns. That one on the ground goes to Solomon Kamara, and Matt Mahler, call him an athlete, call him a quarterback, whatever you want to call him. He gets 3 touchdowns on the short yard situation. And then these guys in Robin Couillard, Romeo Lucier, and Tristan Gilbert Thibault, and a whole bevy of receivers getting involved. So from the offensive standpoint, which was really the Achilles heel of this team in the first half of the year, has really come alive with Josh Jansen taking the reins. Aslan looks like he's in good shape, and it's really looking like a well-rounded offense. Tom, I was super impressed by this Ottawa team, not because they beat U of T. Unfortunately, it just hasn't been U of T's year. We've seen a number of teams do that, as you detailed, Western being one of them very recently. It's the way that they're doing right now, which, not really spoiler alert, the playoffs are set in stone. Ottawa's traveling to the Royal City to take on my Guelph Griffins, your Guelph Griffins, everybody's Guelph Griffins. And they scare me a little bit. This offense, and we know the defense is good. We'll talk about them shortly. This offense is looking strong.
What a surgence of offensive firepower from the Ottawa GGs. You and I both knew going into this season, certainly in the first half of the year, that the Ottawa offense was not playing up to their potential when unfortunately our guy Ben Miracle was in for whatever reason. He just didn't have the same rhythm that he used to. But I don't know if you and I really were aware of the capabilities that this Ottawa offense had. And Josh Jansen in there has really seemingly just opened up all of the possibilities. I mean, Robin Coulier, 6 catches for 124 yards. And going into the season, I had no idea who that was. No disrespect to the young man, obviously. We just hadn't heard his name being called. And if I were to tell you going into the season, in the last game of the regular season, that Ben Miracle would not be the starting quarterback and Maxime Font would be injured and not being able to play, I think you and I both would be going, oh crap, I think this Ottawa team's in trouble. Instead, my goodness. I mean, Josh Jansen's numbers 17 for 19, 289 yards and a touchdown. Those are outstanding numbers. Yes, Toronto has been struggling this past year. Absolutely. You can say that. The defense is still relatively solid, especially the linebacker play. And to see them really do their thing has really been outstanding. And not only that, but once again, you start talking about the pass, setting up the run, and all of those capabilities. Charles Aslan, 18 attempts, 104 yards. But in the game itself, you're watching him bounce off defenders, and you're watching a guy who's now, relatively at least, healthy throughout the entire game. And you're not getting into a fourth quarter where the guy's touched the ball like 40 times and he's gassed and he's, if he doesn't do it, then the offense is really stalling. Instead, you're able to lean on him in certain areas and say, hey, you know what? We need to get into the red zone. We need a key scenario here. Let's get it to our guy in Aslan, who has the speed to make a guy miss, but then also has the wherewithal to say, you know what? I need a yard or two. I'm going to lower my helmet, and chances are I'm going to get that too. So I'm really impressed by this Ottawa offense. My goodness, are they coming alive at the perfect time?
Yeah, and I really like how you made mention of the carries being, I mean, 18 carries is very healthy, but somewhat limited because we go back earlier in the season and, think about that Waterloo game where, we're still really not seeing all that much out of our guy in Ben Miracle at the time. That's the game, of course. I'm trying to remember if it's, that's the one where I think they have the Patrick Cumberbatch touchdown on the defensive side of the ball. But it's a game where Charles Asselin carries the ball 29 times, 184 yards. And really, like, it's no surprise when we started to see him getting banged up because, like, it was just the just quintessentially putting the team on his back. And when you mention some of these receivers that, seemingly coming out of nowhere, just to call it like it is, as you mentioned, what would we have said if there was going to be no Miracle and no Maxime Lafont? Well, it's not just that no Maxime Lafont in there too, but we know this is a team that we didn't necessarily know it going into it because we thought there was a chance Nicolas Gendron was coming back. But the idea that those two guys would play, in the case of Gendron, no games for the GGs this year, and Méléfont maybe half their games, and I don't know if he'll be back for the playoff game, which as a Guelph fan, yay, because he scares me. He's a great athlete. Obviously, I hope he's okay. But they're rolling, and they're rolling at the right time. Which again, it's the classic. It's not how you start, it's how you finish, and how you go into the playoffs. U of T. Just to pivot over there while we're sticking with the offensive side of the ball, they trot out Sam Colby, young kid out there, goes 16 for 28, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. The backfield, we've obviously seen it's been banged up for a lot of the season. No Garrett Ellis. Jack Nyros gets 4 carries. Lucas Stoikos with 7. They really don't get the ground game going. But again, talking about injuries, because we just mentioned Garrett Ellis being out, no Chris Joseph in this one, but we do see the return of Jake Oseen, which frankly, I'm so stoked about because there was the part of me, because it's a shoulder injury that I think he was dealing with. That's the type of thing where it's like, I'm certain his shoulder's not better. I say that with air quotes, like, obviously he's good enough to play, but whatever it was, like the dude was in a sling. I don't know if they dislocated it, whether it was a separation, even if it's minor. That's one of those things that if he took a bad hit in this game, again, I don't actually know what the injury was fully, but just a shoulder injury as a receiver, it's just one of those things where it's like, man, okay, dude, like, just get yourself as healthy as possible. Hopefully surgery's not in the cards for whatever, but he comes out in this game, gets 6 catches, 63 yards and a touchdown. And it just really, it's a point of frustration, but also I think positivity for U of T and for our guy and Coach Kanish is when you say, man, when this team was healthy earlier in the year, they were pretty deadly offensively, relatively speaking. Again, say what you want about Waterloo, because that's certainly a team that, much like, say, York, really grew throughout the season. But you look at how they were able to slice and dice them up in that first week with a healthy Garrett Ellis, with a healthy Jake Oseen, with a healthy Chris Joseph, and of course, Caleb O'Donohue in that one. And there really was some good rhythm to it. Don't know the full stats in terms of eligibility years for guys like Oseen or like Chris Joseph. I think they're all relatively young. We know O'Donohue's young. We know guys like Garrett Ellis are young, Jack Naros. So I think there's still a lot of promise. Ultimately, though, again, on the day, it doesn't end up netting in, well, I guess they get the touchdown there late in the game to Oseen, but though it doesn't end up netting a lot of offensive prowess on the day, I think it still just shows you that, as we've been talking about all year, bits and pieces here, signs of life here and there, and just knowing that, man, like we talk about injuries all the time, this U of T team, it just really has struggled with the injury bug this year.
Yeah, when you once again you look at it, there's a reason why we put York and Toronto in the winning isn't everything tier at the very beginning of the season. And once again, it's so nice when we get to say something at the beginning of the season, then harken back to it at the end of the regular season and say, hey, you know what? We knew what we were talking about. In this game and in this entire season, we've seen flashes. We've seen pieces from this U of T offense. I think Jake Oseen and especially Chris Joseph have been outstanding when they're fully healthy. Caleb O'Donohue, obviously, we saw what he was doing at the beginning of the season as well. And all of these guys, well, O'Donohue in particular, is a first-year player. Only going to get better, and especially under the tutelage of our guy in Tommy Kanichis, this is an offense that's going to continue to build and continue to grow. And once again, first year for an offensive coordinator, Tommy Kanichis has a wide array of experience, both in the OUA and outside of it, and obviously has been learning from a number of really great either head coaches or other offensive coordinators, and he's got an idea of what his ideal offense is in his head. Who knows how many pieces he's missing from this U of T offense, if he is at all, about, hey, you know what, it'd be really awesome to run a power run offense, but I don't have a proper fullback that I think could really take full advantage of that. So instead, we're going to go into a spread offense a little bit more, or whatever the case may be. This is the first year for a lot of the coordinators across the league, and the same could be said about our guy and Coach K-Mac and Coach Greg Knox and Rick Walters and all of these guys, that this is just the first year. As they continue to recruit the kind of guys that they need at their program that fit their offensive schemes or just schemes in general, I think you'll continue to see growth and you can continue to see expansion. So while obviously this year did not end the way that the U of T faithful really hoped for, I'm still very high on the U of T Blues in general here. I think the offense, especially with Coach DA and Bob Mullen, is only going to get better and better as the years go on. And if there's one thing that I know for sure about this coaching staff, is that Coach DA is one hell of a recruiter. Kids love to play for him. They love to talk with him. And especially being in the heart of downtown Toronto and being a part of one of the most prestigious universities in the entire world, there's a lot of things going really well for this U of T team. And I think that as time goes on and as things really get developed, you'll see more and more people flock to the U of T Blues for this exact reason. So U of T fans, the season may be over. I'm still very excited about what the future holds for this squad in general. But obviously the offense in this game was not quite there, let's say.
Yeah. And, again, I'm going to the participation list just to double check. And yeah, obviously no Garrett Ellis, no Chris Joseph, no Elia Linney in this one either. No Ryan Stewart, who we were so excited to see his return. So as far as their linebacking core with Linney and Stewart taking such a hit right there. So again, tough beat for them in this one. It was going to be a tall task for them to come up with the win in this one anyways, but I absolutely second what you said, just especially about Coach DA and the culture shift there and just what job he'll no doubt do. With Ottawa, still no Eric Cumberbatch for them in this one, which again, now that it's win or go home time, right? For everyone, that's obviously going to be a major thing to detail, especially with that passing attack they're dealing with for the Guelph Griffins coming up But just like when you look across this defense, usual suspects coming up big. Riley Hildebrand leading the team in tackles, 4.5. You have Kevin Anderson, again, who's been a little banged up. But the two of them, while we've talked about that rush defense and that pass rush is the weaker aspect of that defense than any others, having those two and then having guys like Jackson Brashear and Daniel Briere in the linebacking core make that front seven definitely solid. And but as we know, it's that back end where you have your Patrick Cumberbatch, your Kevin Victomes, your Tolu Ahmeds in the mix, your Denny Ferdinands. It's just like, again, this is a really strong team that is meshing at the right time right now. And, really, it's just, again, just Ottawa football in general, because unfortunately, as we'll detail shortly to come, Carlton Ravens not making the playoffs. I feel like they would be the nightmare team for anyone to have to deal with as well as a first round team coming into your barn. So, I think Ottawa is clicking with all the right things right now. If they get Eric Cumberbatch back, that's huge for them. And oh man, it's I know you were kind of teasing, we'll get into Max shortly, the prospect of if they didn't get in, at the very least, you don't have to deal with the stress of being a fan. Tom, for a while they were hashtag not my Griffins for a little while. Now that they're my Griffins again, there's a lot of emotions I have going through my mind right now because they're still a little bit my Ottawa GGs, and this is going to be a tough one for me, man. Take over, Tom. I need to breathe.
Oh, feel for you, my man. I'm sure your heart's going to be torn at least a little bit. Although I'm pretty sure, as much as you say that you're an Ottawa GG, you are die hard Guelph Griffin. So we'll see how that goes. But anyways,
it was died pretty easy during those Sheehan years, I'll admit. It died pretty easily.
Oh goodness. For the Ottawa squad, this Ottawa defense, once again, with the birth of the offense and how well it's been really performing, you're now leaning into the real strength of what your defense is, which is that secondary. And while, yes, you don't have Eric Cumberbatch and you don't have even Maxime Elefant on the offensive side, if there was ever a game where you say, hey, you know what, you're 50-50, you could go, why don't you sit out for this one? Just try to get as healthy as you possibly can be. I would not be surprised if going into, and I don't want to talk about next week because we're still recapping the previous week, but wouldn't be surprised if there's a couple of names that we didn't see on this list that will be on the game list for next week. It's playoffs, baby, win or go home every single time. So if you got anything in the bag, now's the time to open it up. For this Ottawa offense in particular, once again, I think that they're really playing on their strengths when they're able to get up, and this offense is able to get up and score quickly, and now leaning on your guys in the back end and how well they're able to do. I mean, nothing really jumps off the page here, but 4 tackles for loss in the backfield with a number of guys getting half tackles, I think means that when the blitzes are coming, they're getting home. Even our guy in Kevin Victome with a half of a tackle for loss. So they're starting to get there, which means you can afford to send some guys. You can afford to send linebackers, middle linebacker blitzes, even seven-man ups when it's appropriate, because you got guys in the back end that can go man-to-man coverage and can compete with some of the best receivers in the league. Now, when you start playing against the Vashon Januses of the world, the Kane Stevensons, maybe, you want a little bit of extra help. You don't always want to go one-on-one, but the capabilities are there so that if you need to, hey, you know what? A halfback blitz off the edge when you're not expecting it, or, a saw blitz with the Sam and the Will coming, they can afford to do that and still have outstanding coverage in the back end. So this team is really built to get up early and to keep it that way with an outstanding offense and a defense that's trained really against the pass super well. So that's a scary thought, most definitely. And especially in Canadian football, the better your defensive secondary is, the better your overall team will be. I can tell you from experience on some of my McMaster teams, we had some pretty good defensive secondaries. So despite the record, despite everything else, yeah, this Ottawa GG's team, they are peaking at the perfect time and at all facets, it seems. Even Denny Ferdinand in the return game. Don't sleep on that, because they'll make you pay for that as well. So this is gonna be a good game coming up this week.
It certainly will. I believe the term GG refers to the first horse out the gate. And in the case of these GGs, they're coming on strong late. So it doesn't matter if it goes against the very essence of their logo. Again, it's going to be a hell of a matchup. And I'm just, I'm trying to just lock into the notion that's going to be an amazing football game, and we'll get there when we get there. Tom, any final thoughts on this matchup?
Oh, just thank you for the U of T Blues. Thank you for all the effort that you put into this season. It was awesome being able to watch you. And once again, we talked about at the beginning of the program, no blowouts. There hasn't been a real blowout game, especially for these U of T Blues in this entire season. Certainly some games that maybe were a little bit out of reach, but
Western.
nothing. Yeah, but nothing that was really, oh my goodness, look at this by any means. So I appreciate everything that the U of T Blues have done this past season. Like I said, U of T fans have hope. You've got the right people in place, especially at the coaching level. So I truly think that they will find a way to win and really get back into the competitive spirits in the OUA. So that's all I got to say.
We will see the U of T Blues at our exit meeting with them in a podcast to come, and we will talk Ottawa GG's football in a podcast much more sooner to come when we break down the first round of the OUA playoffs. But we go from the nation's capital to Hamilton, Ontario, to see the York Lions fall to the McMaster Marauders 24-21. The best game hands down across the province, and the game that, when it was all said and done, had real stakes on the line, because at the end of the day, with Ottawa winning, with Laurier winning, this was a win and you're in affair for these two clubs. And boy, oh boy, did it come down to the wire. Tom, this is a game that saw fans get kicked out for heckling. This is a game that saw a last 2-minute interception by the York Lions to give themselves a fighting chance of taking the lead. This is a game that saw that riverboat gambler and Dexter Janke go for the touchdown with 3 seconds to go to end the first half, as opposed to tying up the ball game with a field goal, which at the end of the game, I'm not going to nitpick that one or whatever. I love the decision. It's always easier to look back in hindsight. This game had it all. It was an outstanding performance by both sides of the ball. You could feel the emotions of these clubs, and no one was perhaps more emotional than yourself, Tom, in checking this one out. Share with the folks what this experience was like for you, and the matchup the outstanding matchup we had with these two teams.
Well, I think it's no surprise that, especially being in the position that I'm in, working with a beautiful man in yourself and covering all of these games like we normally do, that many people across the league were either tied to, whether being a fan or played for, a lot of the other teams that my McMaster Marauders beat when I was a part of that squad. And we had obviously a very good run while I was there, winning a few Yates Cups. So naturally, now that my Marauders aren't doing quite as well, I get a lot of people who love to remind me of that. Obviously, you being one of them. But my DMs are pretty active with folks like to remind me about, hey, your Marauders might be knocked out of the playoffs once again if everything goes on like it did. So I had a lot of folks who were coming for me, most definitely. But in this one, it was absolutely justified, because York is a good team. York had the capabilities to win this game in a few different areas. Obviously, Matt coming up with some major plays, defense playing very well, and the offense doing their thing. But yeah, this was not no worries, we just got to beat York and then we're into the playoffs. Like you mentioned, 24-21, and if everything goes well in that last minute in the second half, I mean, they potentially score a touchdown, go up at halftime, and this is a completely different ball game in the second half. So there was a lot of key areas, key moments that happened in this one that just kept the Marauders, edged them up to the win for here. But yeah, it was a little bit tense, especially at that, you mentioned it, the interception with, I believe it was like a minute to go or just over that in the fourth quarter, when that happened, I think it's called the surrender cobra with my hands up on my head like this, looking like a cobra in the background. And then you coming over and hugging me in a bear hug, going, "Oh my God, it happened on interception." So, folks, I was not doing well, but thankfully my defense really came through in that one and was still able to get the ball back. But it was my heartbeat going.
Yeah, I mean, what a finale. And, what I was really happy with, getting to kind of talk with some of the folks on the Max side just afterwards, was just the kind of the air of like, hey, doesn't matter. We got it done. Which again, you go back to that Western game of like, look, you got to put it on the shelf and move on to the next one. You look at that Waterloo game and having them escape out of there and everything like that. The Cole Crossett kick nearly giving Waterloo the lead right at the end of regulation, and maybe that one goes the other way around. And then this one, just nearly just snatching victory from the jaws of defeat or whatever that expression goes like. But at a certain point, now that it's winning time, this is where it now becomes a question of like, well, how far is that really going to take you now that it's win or go home? Just, sticking with York, obviously, again, it's a year where, as you relayed talking about U of T, we had him in that winning isn't everything mentality. And it really felt like after that Red and Blue Bowl victory, and it partly paired with a Matt Lynn injury, where you start to see them turn to Sean Law, and he was 21 for 31, 305, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception. The interception just like last minute, like you kind of put that one aside, other than the fact that it's our guy in Wes McLennan coming down with that interception. So shout out to that young man. Tom makes a face.
I believe it was Eric Cumber at the very dying seconds of that.
You're right. It was our guy. Josh Cumber. Yeah. But showing, you're right. It totally was. It's showing Wes McLennan though. Shout out to Wes anyways.
Shout out Wes McLennan, absolutely. But they're also showing Wes McLennan in the quarterback standpoint, going 1 for 1 for minus 17 yards. So not quite sure how many different positions our guy in Wes McLennan played, but I can tell you that's incorrect, and so is the interception. It should go to our guy in Josh Cumber. He made an awesome one. So just
and it shows Josh with an interception in the box score as well. It also shows Wes McLennan with 0 interceptions, but 3 yards on those 0 interceptions. So something fishy is going on. Again, shout out to Josh Cumber, shout out to Wes McLennan. But nonetheless, a really strong day for Sean Law, and just a team that, again, had this mentality of once they were able to see the victory happen. And for so many people in sports and in life alike, seeing is believing, and being able to actually look at what head coach and Dexter Janke has done and changing this culture around, in recognizing it's not just oh yeah, rah rah, go Lions, and yeah, we're gonna win our decals and this, that, and the third. It's like, no, like we're coming here to kick ass and chew bubble gum, and we're all out of bubble gum. And you talked about what Melkus did on the day, the Avery Ford Sean Law connection, like with a full season of that, if that's what we get next year, like chalk that one down as maybe one of the best quarterback receiver connections. As you were mentioning, when we were talking to Sean, the idea that he could still come back. Sean kind of talked about that, like, there's the opportunity for him to still come back. And as you mentioned, him getting that chemistry with these guys, it's a really promising situation with a lot of youth on this team. The one thing, and so we can talk about a number of these points, the one thing I'll be interested to see into next year, and obviously, as you were talking about, they're still on the recruiting path. That gateway to Can West is very much open for them and being able to pull that talent in. But as I was making mention to one of the coaches I know well on that staff, is that, you won't catch anyone by surprise next year. Mm-hmm. And certainly against U of T, that's a game where, hey, look, and no matter how those teams are doing, they're going at each other's throats. No doubt there. Waterloo, as a bared out on the year, those teams were very well matched up, and that one could have gone to Waterloo, and this one they could have pulled off. And there were some really impressive things we saw in that Guelph game and other games they had this season as well. That Queens game again, but regardless, it's just the matter of fact where, like, the way that we talk about Western week as a thing, York week, it can kind of be a thing in itself, in that you can kind of not under prepare, because I don't want to say that the football teams going into these matchups don't take all their matchups super seriously, but it's no longer a situation where you can just say, okay, what do we want to refine? What do we want to tinker with? Who maybe is going to get reps that maybe doesn't get reps the following week when we're in that more playoff bound matchup, so on and so forth. So while it's a great step forward for York, and again, we teased with a couple people, you know what? Do you really need to make the playoffs just to go to Western and have them do awful, terrible things to you? It's great. It's a great year for them. I'll be curious going into next year now whether that changes the approaches other clubs take going into this matchup, knowing now, like, hey, look, this is a legit team that will catch you sleeping. And, again, just all the props in the world to them.
Yeah, most definitely. I mean, we really can't say enough amazing things about what Coach Dexter Janke and the rest of that coaching staff have done this year. And one of my favorite aspects of this is when you watch some of the things that are on social media, you see some of the what the guys are posting as well to get themselves motivated, whatever. They're not shying away from what happened last year, saying, you know what, this is a part of who we were. This is something that's in our history, but it is history. It's not who we are anymore. We are building towards something else, and they absolutely have been. I mean, Melka Zalunga, this is the first game where we really saw the capabilities that he has. 9 attempts on the ground, 74 yards and a touchdown, along with 7 catches for 97 yards in the air as well. This is really showcasing all of the amazing things that he's able to do. And I think the connection between him and Sean Law is very apparent. Even in Sean's outstanding ability to escape out of the pocket and make something happen. He's always got his eyes looking downfield, and anytime you play a quarterback it's not rattled, I'd say, by the defense that's coming at him, man, that makes it really tough for a defense because suddenly you see it so many guys. You see it in the pros as well. Somebody gets sacked a bunch or somebody gets hit a bunch, and certainly Sean got sacked a whole bunch of times against this McMaster squad. I mean, they sacked him 8 times on the box score, and they hit him a whole lot more than that. So he very easily and justifiably could have been sitting in the pocket looking down at the brush that was coming at him. But because he never does, because he has the ability to escape the pocket, as a defensive secondary, whether you're a linebacker covering or whether you're DB, you have to stay true to whatever coverage that you're in. Because if you deviate from that thinking, oh, he's out of the pocket as a halfback, I can come up and make a tackle, ball's going over top of your head, or he's finding somebody downfield. And we know that this young man has a cannon for an arm. So even if he's on the run, going for a 40-yard bomb is not out of the question. So really becomes dangerous in that setting. Now, what I will say is that I think there was a number of times where Sean Law showed a little bit of inexperience. And I think because he hadn't really started and played as many games, he wasn't getting meaningful reps and getting that knowledge, because there's a couple of times where he took sacks that were key sacks that made the clock run a little bit longer than it should, obviously. And even in that second half, last second effort to get into the end zone, he finds an open receiver, but it's a running back coming out of the backfield who gets tackled. And in that kind of a setting, when you only have 2 or 3 seconds left, just throw the ball to somebody in the end zone. Just give your guy a chance. Worst case scenario, you throw it a pick, but chances are they get tackled in the end zone and then the half is over anyways. So I think a little bit more coaching from that standpoint. I'm praying that this young man comes back next year, selfishly, because I just love to see the guy succeed, and I love to see him win despite all of the hardships that he's had to go through. But I think a little bit of experience from that standpoint and getting proper coaching would do this young man a world of benefit, and especially getting that experience there. So it was a couple of mistakes there that I saw myself, but overall, I mean, this offense was playing fantastic, and especially when you look at, I mean, Avante McCoy, he only touches the ball 4 times and still gets 63 yards just off of touching it 4 times. So showcasing he's got the capabilities. McMaster obviously did a great job in limiting him, only 2 catches in the passing game. And that's obviously something that they thought about saying, hey, you know what? Probably be our best bet if this guy didn't touch the ball very often, because he can torch you anytime he does. So combination between a couple of mistakes here or there and a very solid defensive game plan, I think, was really what helped them in this one.
Yeah, and you know what? I love all the things you were mentioning, and there's part of me as you were talking about his ability to not get rattled by the pass rush, and Obviously, you don't want that to happen. And we were kind of going back and forth a few times where it was maybe more of a coverage sack, other times where just a guy beating their man and just putting that pressure on. But there was times where, as you were saying, I'm like, maybe he should have got a little rattled to your point, maybe get a little not happy feet, quick trigger, anything like that. Because again, it definitely there were times again, and it's I think you highlight all the right things where you just God, you can't take that sack. You have to get that ball out a little quicker. But he throws an incredible off-platform ball. Like he just has such effortless throwing mechanics. Just over the shoulder, very traditional release point, and he's just so big that even with a guy in his face, he can just get the ball off. And with some of these big receivers he has, it's really special. But there was a team that won this game and it is going to the playoffs, and that is the McMaster Marauders. And though on the day, stat wise, you look at Keegan Hall's day, 21 for 36, 267, one touchdown, two interceptions, you might give the nod to Sean Law. That piece on being able to stay with his reads as he evades pressure is all the more reason why this is a guy where we were talking about it a little bit at the game. We were talking about more so before we recorded, is going to go down as one of if it does come to pass where there just aren't enough awards to hand out to quarterbacks in terms of MVP, in terms of all-star nods and the like, where he'll go down as one of the best individual seasons where a guy isn't getting a nod. And maybe it'll surprise us. Maybe you will. But when you look at some of the other dogs around this league, again, it might go that way because it was the touchdown he was able to throw early in the game to Aiden Nemeth, where he's rolling out of the pocket to his left. Eyes don't leave the receiver the whole time and just throws just an absolute seed to his guy. And it gets to that point now where he's so special, not just with the arm talent, but his evadability. And doesn't look like the most fleet of foot guys, but in just that way that really special quarterbacks can just recognize the leverage their line has and being able to that escapability with relative not ease, but without working too hard, kind of working smart, not hard. We were even talking at times, it might get to a point where it was almost like, do you have to play contain with him? Just keep him in there. Cause once he gets out of the pocket, it just felt like, I don't know, he bought himself too much time. But it's like, no, you can't just let him sit in the pocket. And do you bring more pressure? This was a big talking point for us the last 2 weeks and going against guys like K-Mac and going against guys like Greg Knox of, you know what, maybe you pump the brakes a little bit and just say, look, if you send him pressure, he's going to eat you alive. But if you give him that time, certainly not a game by the numbers where he ate them alive, so to speak, but it's just like, once again, salute to this young man. What a great quarterback battle it was we had on our hands. And no doubt you're going to want to talk about it, but the one thing I know you're not going to want to talk about, I'll bring up though, is terrific receiving core. We possibly saw Jackson Taylor show his age a few times. A couple balls here and there where you're like, when this guy's a third year getting all-star nods, he's making that catch on the sideline where he's going back shoulder and having to reverse pivot and like, oh, that's a tough ball, but it's like that's one that a veteran OUA receiver with the track record of how he's projecting, right? No doubt he's getting there, but just like that's one that Jackson, those are balls that Jackson Coolings is bringing in that maybe not Jackson Taylor. And Taylor, again, still gets 3 receptions on the day. Cooling gets 5, Nemeth 7 receptions. The touchdown goes over 123. James Prieston with a really nice reception for 24 yards and the likes. But a few times in there where it was like, you know what? As close as this game was, there was a few times early on because these two quarterbacks, well, I shouldn't say just these two quarterbacks because there's so many great arm talents, but specifically watching Keegan Hall where he's throwing these field outs and it's like just a little bit outside or it's just off the hands of his guy. And it's a ball where it's like, that's a 1%er throw that he's doing there. And it just wasn't connecting early on where, again, Mac might have gotten a little more rhythm and things could have slid a little more to their advantage because it's a team that goes up 10-0 in the first quarter. And obviously that's not an insurmountable amount by any means, but it was kind of, and I give a lot of the credit to the York defense. It was a bit rickety at times for that Mac offense.
Yeah. And I love that you brought Jackson Taylor in that one because there were any ball that is let's call it a standard catch where, it's something easy coming over the middle, if it's an in route or a slant route or something along those lines, or if he's not contested, like he's coming down with those for sure. But that's now the status quo across the league. There's good receivers across this entire league that can come down with those. All of the drops that he did have, not one of them were an easy ball by any means, but in certain scenarios, I mean, I trying to think of the one that happened really close to us where it was either a bang route or it was an out route. And either one of those, the defender is right on you. So if Keegan's going to throw that ball and he threw it beautifully, he has to throw it to the outside and he's got to rip it to really make sure that the defender doesn't have any capabilities to come over the top to either bat it down or pick it off. And so in that scenario, you're either coming directly out of a break, especially in a bang route where you're coming from cross directional. So you're going inside and then coming back outside, shifting your entire body weight. And good quarterbacks like Keegan Hall is, the moment that you get into your break, they're throwing the ball. So you got to whip your head around and try to catch that. I'm not saying that that's easy by any means, but that's kind of the level of expectation now that Jackson Taylor is in. And it's, in my opinion, it is a compliment because we've seen him do outstanding things against Laurier at the very beginning of the season, against a whole bunch of really outstanding defenses. To now we're almost forgetting his age, being like, oh, come on, you gotta catch that. You gotta bring that down. And then you're like, oh no, that's a true freshman who's like 18, 19 years old.
Yeah, exactly.
Bullet from Keegan Hall in a tight game. So there's certainly some, context that's needed in that to really look at this, but Jackson Taylor is putting himself in the upper echelon of some of those receivers in the OUA right now. And if you're going to consistently get there, you have to make those tough catches. Certainly something that I know he's going to continue to build, and the future is so bright for this young man going forward. Absolutely. But yeah, absolutely. We saw some of those drops that are happening there. On the opposite side of that, somebody who played really outstanding, Aiden Nemeth in that. 7 catches for 123 yards and a touchdown. He was doing really well, but really doing a great job of taking advantage of what the York defense was giving them. From as far as I could tell, and I'm an offensive lineman, so defensive secondary is the furthest thing from me, and a guy in Eric Colonna, you can correct me all day long, but it looked like York, for the most part, was playing a lot of hold coverage, meaning that the flats and that the outside was open. And so Keegan is ripping these, 5 to 10 yard outs to Aiden Nemeth as an out route, go close to the sidelines. And Aiden, a couple of times, just makes one guy miss and he's up the sidelines for a good gain. I believe his long of 44 was exactly that. In between the corner and the safety that's coming over, just a quick move and just races down the sideline, which was awesome to see. But taking advantage of what the defense is giving you, not getting cute and not getting, we have to do this a whole bunch of waggles and we have to do a whole bunch of motion. No, if it's cut coverage and the corner's bailing, just throw to where the corner's bailing. Especially when a guy like Keegan Hall, you can make those like 40-yard throws in the Canadian game to do a 10-yard out and do that pretty consistently. So I like the fact that the MAC offense was really, for the most part, just taking what the York defense was giving them. But there were a few times where that York defense kind of flexed their muscles and being like, yeah, this isn't something that we're giving you. You're going to have to fight for this, and we're going to win some of these battles too.
Yeah, and you know what? Again, shout out to that MAC offensive line, just with the youth they have. First year starter, first year starter in at center, youth across that line. It's just a strong performance by them. Obviously, York brought a lot of stuff to deal with, and hey, look, I'm right there with you, fellas. I know what that's like going against that defense, and we've really seen improvements from that group. And just going back to what you mentioned about with Jackson Taylor, and it's like a receiver by any other name, and any other year we probably wouldn't be as critical of it or what have you. He's still finished 10th in receptions in the whole OUA with 31, right? Mm-hmm. He's a catch behind guys like Seth Robertson and Mohsen Jamal, and right in the neighborhood of Ajon Janusis, right? 4 touchdowns, matching with guys like Janusis and being one behind that of Avery Ford, a guy that we've been talking about so much, having just, so again, an outstanding rookie campaign, though I've teased you about as well. I think our guy in Tayshawn Jackson might be the offensive rookie of the year nominee nonetheless, but hey, a lot of good things from both sides of the ball for both these clubs. Again, with York, what a heck of a ride this season. And I can't wait to see them do it all over again next year. And Mac, we'll be talking about you later on this week as you get ready for the trip down to the Forest City to take on the Western Mustangs. Tom, anything left for this one?
Yeah, I'd be remiss if I didn't call out somebody that we had the chance to beat, our guy in Peyton Ryder. My goodness, some of the tackles and some of the things that he was doing. One play in particular, I can't remember who the fullback for McMaster was at the time, but coming over almost like a zone slice action where he's coming across the offensive line, coming to the backside of where the play is to kind of seal the end. Peyton Ryder comes off the blitz on the outside and meets the fullback and just demolishes them in the backfield and then ends up making the tackle in that one. And I'm looking at you going, oh, 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 damn. This guy played really well. And when you look at him, he's not super tall, but because of that, his center of gravity is low.
Yeah.
And if you want to be able to block him consistently, you got to get lower than him. And he is a big, strong dude. So that was an awesome thing to really be able to see. Obviously, our guy Brody Clark really doing his thing for that defense as well and just kind of flying all around. But the one thing that I will say, and obviously next week is a mountain to try to cross, most definitely. But to see the boys in maroon get back into the playoffs, to see positivity around the program again after years of missing the playoffs was just really nice to see as an alum, to see guys coming off the field and to be happy and smiling and, do something of a chest bump myself and Wes McLennan right there to just be excited, and Keegan Hall kind of flexing his muscles as well, which was awesome. It was just great to see as an alum, to see that positivity. But woo-wee, do you have a challenge in front of you, boys?
Yeah. So to the York Lions, we say a salute to you. Good night for now. We'll see you in the exit meeting. And Mac, we will see you in London, Ontario, taking on the Western Mustangs. We'll talk about that one later in the week. Let's head to Richardson Stadium, Kingston, Ontario, where the Queen's Golden Gales were coming off the bye to finish off their season against the Waterloo Warriors. Final score in this one, Queens 54, Waterloo 7. Tom, this was one that we were interested in for a number of reasons. One, Queens seemingly, though I think we might have undersold it a bit, had their fate pretty well locked in with that fifth seed, a team that had been really banged up. They're coming off the bye. High likelihood they're going to Windsor. Who do you trot out there? On the other hand, you're dealing with a defense with Coach McNeil, who, as we've been seeing this year, can be a handful to deal with. We kind of joked about a bit of that rivalry with him and Coach Nez and what that would mean to either one to try and get the other's metaphorical goose. But the only goose getting was done by my guy and Nez and his Golden Gales in this one, because it was pretty one-sided. And I want to start with this because, we see Jared Kasari with a great day, and it's 16 for 134 and 2 touchdowns, which kind of makes me think of the commentary you said about Charles Asselin, where he's not having to do it all. And there's a great parallel between those two guys with having a bit of a carousel in the quarterback room for different reasons. And we talked about, I think it was off pod, Russell Weir with the 2 rushing touchdowns and 1 on that quarterback sneak for 60 yards. He bounces to the outside. Kid's a great athlete. Obviously, he returns kicks for them as well. But really starting to see, and I'll hand it off to you on this because you brought to my attention when we were doing a little not way too early, but a little early conversation about the Queens Windsor playoff game coming up. Anthony Leo starting to look pretty good. 11 for 21, 183, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. And he's doing all the things you need him to. He's hitting Nico Cuomo for 4 and a touchdown, 79 yards. He's hitting Nathan Falcone only twice for 41 and the touchdown as well. But he's getting to the guys that he needs to get the ball to. He's not causing them any issues, not throwing picks in this one. We've seen a positive performance going into the bye week. It's a situation where, we were talking about, we'll get to the Laurier game shortly, of like, as you were highlighting, people talking about, well, how long do you keep Taylor Elgersma in the game for? Do you have him in the whole game? Like if Rican was ready to go, do you say, well, let's get him in for maybe a quarter, 2 quarters, and then we get Leo in? Leo playing this whole game kind of tells me that seems like that might just be who they want to be rolling with. And frankly, it's not the same as Alex Freakin, but I think with the number of reps he's gotten this year and last year, he gives them a shot for sure.
Yeah, he's been playing pretty solid football. And once again, maybe the numbers don't jump off the page. It's obviously only started in a few games this past season, but the big one there is the goose egg on the interception so far. And I will knock on wood for the Queen's faithful. But I think that he's been playing really smart football. And I, once again, a shout out to our guy and Coach Nez. And I think he's putting him in great scenarios to be successful. It's not a long drawn out, oh, here's a wheel route here, or here's whatever here, or here's, slant play into triple coverage or whatever the case may be. But smart with the football, finding your guys when they're open, Nico Cuomo being one of them, and just kind of looking down the line. Cuomo, Nico Cuomo, 4 catches for 79 yards and a touchdown. Logan Walton, 2 catches for 57. Nathan Falcone, 2 catches for 41 and another touchdown. Matteo Tuccioti, 2 catches for 10 yards. Preston Martin, 1 catch for 9 yards. So spread the ball out, get everybody involved, and be smart with the football. And I really love that when you come and you look at this Queens offense. And once again, it's also pretty nice when you go, hey, you know what? Maybe we should hand it off to Jared Kasari, one of the best running backs in the entire league, and he'll go 16 attempts, 134 yards, and 2 touchdowns on the ground. No big deal, no big day. So having that in your back pocket as well, that's pretty awesome to be able to say. With an O line that finally had our guy in Jazz Kyra back on the starting left tackle spot, seemingly getting as healthy as possible going into what's going to be a very big challenge for them, obviously, in the next game here. But love to see the Queens Golden Gales and the offense continue to do the thing.
Yeah, and you talked about the no interceptions for Leo, and I don't know if you were talking about specifically just on the day. That's his numbers for the season. He's 6 touchdowns, no interceptions, 62% passing completion. He's only thrown 74 balls, but you put him in, like Miracle threw 73 in this on the season through the games that he was able to start and play in. And Miracle throws 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. He's 52% in the completion percentage. So you talk about a guy where going into the year, if you were saying, okay, you can take Anthony Leo or Ben Miracle. Like, I think where we would have stood on that. And from where we stand right now, and you can work into saying, like, well, what about the weapons and these guys and how does that end up aiding them? Look, as we've talked about, Otto is in no shortage of weapons of their own. And this isn't a way of taking a shot at our guy in Ben Miracle, but just a way of saying, again, Anthony Leo is playing ball with all these guys that they have. And, we'll pivot over to the defense shortly enough, no doubt, with how good they are, where he's giving you a chance. Now, obviously, that doesn't rule out the possibility that we see Vreeken trot out there in Win City next week. But frankly, I just think from what we've been seeing right now, this might be your best opportunity. For Waterloo, they go to Nick Orr. They go to Nick Orr, which was an interesting choice because where I'm sitting right now, you look at the day, I look at the year between these two kids and Orr and Caban. Orr goes 8 for 15, no touchdowns, no interceptions. Caban 0 for 3, really just some garbage time there. And you say to yourself, I haven't a clue who's starting next year. And at the end of the day, if one of them really went off, do you need to have that solved right now? I guess not. But it's the third full year of having both these guys in your program. And unless your quarterbacks' names are Marshall McCray and Tristan Abood, I feel like you should probably have that figured out. I'll look at Windsor with their carousel they have going on, and look at Waterloo, because these quarterbacks that we always talk about is like, oh, they got some young quarterbacks. Young quarterbacks get old quickly, and you have a really good running back in Quentin Springer. Anthony Miller, don't know his status other than the fact that he obviously had his year ending because of surgery. Cholera's probably gone off that O-line next year. It's with Waterloo again. Love a lot of things we've seen from them this year, and we were able to see them get the run game going. We saw some spurts from it in this one with Springer as well. It's just that standpoint where it's a tough defense. We'll talk about that defense for Queens as we always do, but I'm unsure what the vision is for this team offensively right now.
Yeah, and I completely understand where you're coming from there. I'm also on the same page, but when you look at, just the day today, Queen's defense finishes with 6 sacks, 9 tackles for loss, one one fumble recovery and 4 pass breakups. I mean, it's not like he's thrown into on air by any means here. I really liked what I saw from Nick Orr in the parts of the season where he was healthy, obviously. He seemed to show a lot of promise and certainly was building and building towards getting better and better as the season was going on. But having Noah Caban really do his thing going into this as well, there is going to be obviously a big battle for the quarterback spot going into next year. It's certainly something that we'll be looking into most definitely. But I still think I'm still high on this Waterloo team. While, yes, they didn't get a win this entire season, they were damn close in a number of games, including a McMaster game, including a U of T game at the very beginning of the year. And once again, we talked about coordinators and new positions here. With Coach Kevin McNeil, he's a great defensive coordinator, but a really phenomenal recruiter as well.
Mhm.
I mean, you can speak to it more better than anybody can, but the relationship that he has with his players is seemingly outstanding. I mean, even my time talking with him when I was at the East West Bowl, spending a lot of time at Waterloo, frick, he's a great guy. Getting a chance to just laugh and talk shop and hang out with them. I'm a big fan of the guy as well. So I have nothing but positive vibes for the Waterloo Warriors in lack of a better term there, I guess, even despite the 0-8 season and obviously not the way that you want to finish. You've got a lot of young guys who are very promising. Michael Omaseni being chief among them, I think, as that middle linebacker and playing some of his best football so far, even just as a second year. Obviously, Quentin Springer and Anthony Miller, as long as Miller is able to get back healthy, is another outstanding capability. And really, Nick Orr and Nolan Caban took turns playing in some great games this entire season and having some really good performances, both with the ability to take off and run with it as well. So I'm still optimistic. And while certainly if you look at just stats alone, you go, oh, there's an 0-8 team. What are you guys talking about? If you actually watch these games and you watch how Waterloo has been playing, you'll share my optimism, I'm willing to bet.
Yeah, no, I'm with you on that, and yeah, K-Mac's a hell of a recruiter. He'll get on the trail, and obviously Burt we know is a great recruiter as well. Just pulling up again a bit of the comparison stats with Orr and with Caban. You look at on the numbers, they don't quite even out to be able to really see just what you want to make of it. But Orr throws 51% completion, Caban 61, albeit about 50 more attempts for Orr. So obviously it's going to be harder to keep consistency with greater attempts there. Orr with 822 yards, Caban with 700. Orr 3 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. Caban with 4 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. So I think whichever way you slice it, again, there's not a clear edge one way or another. To many folks, I think you can also just spin it as being like, look, having 2 young quarterbacks in your program right there who've grown together and to be able to have that competition is certainly a blessing. Teams over the years are just struggling to get one decent quarterback, let alone to have 2. So you know what? Good problems to have, and they have the right people in the mix to be able to do it. And again, shout out to our guy and Coach Conway for giving, I'm assuming offensive lineman just by the look of him, and Daniel Dove a short yardage carry. I believe they got stuffed, and I think it was a turnover on downs, but he was checked in as like a H-back, extra fullback. And before you know it, he's just sliding under center to take the handoff. No doubt Coach Bertoya perhaps had a little bit of, his 2 cents added in for that one to see the big guy get a carry. So I love that one. On the Queen side of things, we've obviously looked at what Eonce Arnaud did and what he's done all year long for them. It's been so spectacular. You mentioned about the way that defense was going off. The pass rush was there all day. I mean, Salas Hubert only showing the 1 sack, I guess, an additional tackle for loss. It felt like he was doing more damage, and it's just he's so big that it's hard to miss him when he's just crashing into that backfield and just causing all sorts of ruckus. Your guy and Justin Pace getting in the backfield a few times, causing issues. Darian Newell on that sack. Oh my gosh. Yeah, it's reasons like this where when you have a team, and like this, partly the same reason you can look at a team like Ottawa and be like, man, underdog, sure, but do they have a chance? Yeah, because when you can say we are best at X might be better than anyone else's, our secondary play, if you're Queens, pardon me, if you're Ottawa, our front seven play, if you're Queens, our rushing attack, if you're Queens, it's hard to not count them out. And it's weird where this decade so far for Queens, where you start off with James Keane and all the great things that he was doing as dual quarterback in that time. They go to the back-to-back Yates Cups. That obviously includes the 6-game shortened season in 2021. Then of course with Alex Vreeken, he's been banged up, and they don't get back to the mountaintop, but they're playing these competitive semifinal games, and it's just they almost knock out Western last year in the regular season, where it feels like a team where I don't know, like if there's a team we're sleeping on, maybe it's them, and maybe we're right to at times, because like at the end they just win, but only one team ends up coming on top in the whole conference. And as far as like the teams, as far as how they've been producing this decade, after Western, like should actually go back and look through the wins and losses and playoff wins and losses. Like Queens might be that team right after them. Like, obviously Laurier these past 2 years has been phenomenal. But again, as we're looking at this era of Coach Snyder's record with this club and what he's been building there, we talk about that whole thing of in these programs that are on the up and up now, these younger teams that are trying to like establish themselves, and how having right people in right places, can really help you take you there. Again, look at what Coach Schneider's done there in his tenure, really making this a club where, those 2010 years, even with our dude and Nate Hobbs, like those weren't teams that were really scaring people come the playoffs and everything like that. Queens, I think, is in a strong position. It's going to be a tough task for them going on the road. You can play the whole, it's hard to beat a team twice if you want to add it in. But I think this team, much like Ottawa, like goodness gracious, what a stacked OUA playoffs this is right now. Because I think that if you're Windsor, you're not looking forward to have to deal with this, with this team really from all fronts.
No, I mean, if you're looking at this entire Queens team, and once again, going into the season, we were talking about it, and we're talking about it again here because we're just so damn good at predicting things. When this Queens team is playing their best football, and right now the big thing that's keeping them from playing their best football is a lot of the injuries that they're dealing with. But if they can get key guys back in key scenarios here and they can continue to keep playing, I mean, name a better running back than Jared Kasari. Name a better defensive end than Silas Hubert. Name a better defensive tackle than Darian Newell. Name certainly in the contention of best defensive backs out there, Asher Miller, Melanson, Keegan Vanek, and the rest of the guys that are back there. This is a great squad that has been underperforming because of a lot of the injuries, and certainly starting with the offensive line and how many guys that they've had to dress and how many guys that they've had to rotate in certain areas here. Having Jazz Cairo back at the left tackle spot is massive for them. Nicholas Henning has been playing fantastically at the right tackle spot as well, and assuming that offensive line position when he was previously a fullback last year. So if they can continue to keep rolling here, absolutely, this is a dangerous Queens squad. Do not sleep on them whatsoever. The thing that I do want to bring up here, and when you look at some of the quarterback play, like you mentioned, Anthony Leo has thrown 6 touchdowns and no interceptions in 3 starts, starting against Western, Laurier, and now against Waterloo. When you look at Alex Vreeken, his stats on the year, he's only played in 5 games, 76 for 127, 1,046 in the air, 6 touchdowns to 10 interceptions. And so while certainly you can say, like Alex Vreeken has really proved himself to be a top tier quarterback when he's healthy and doing these things, and he can really start getting a little bit more, trying to force the ball in certain spaces because he's done it previously. Absolutely. And I don't want to take anything away from this young man, but if you're Anthony Leo and your Queens Golden Gales looking at him being like, yeah, maybe his numbers don't come off the page by any means. Maybe he won't take over a game for us. But with all of the other receivers that you have and Jared Kasari in the backfield and the offensive line, if they can play well, do you really need him to? Do you just need a guy who can get you a few scores, be smart with the football, keep the defense honest by getting it to your guys in Nico Cuomo, Nathan Falcone, and everybody else, and just allow Jared Kasari to run all over defenses like he's been doing all damn year as long as he can stay healthy? So in this iteration of what we've been seeing Queens, and especially in this offense and what they're able to do, being smart with the football, moving the ball down consistently and utilizing all of the weapons that they have and getting healthy in key areas. Woo! Yeah, this is a dangerous Queens Golden Gales team, and they are looking to stay golden. I know I just threw that in just so I could say golden in the right proper tense here, but I love saying Queens Golden Gales.
It rolls off the tongue, really. And Tom, that makes a lot of sense, except the only thing I'd push back on is that when they played Laurier and they played Western, even Kasari having good days on the ground just can't keep up with those offenses. So a moment's going to come where they're going to have to say to Anthony Leo, all right, son, let it rip. And that'll be when it's going to be an interesting test of just where his ceiling is. Because I think if he's throwing the number of balls that Vrieken is throwing, and I'm not trying to be like an Alex Vrieken apologist. Obviously, I think he's an outstanding kid. And I think, again, when he's healthy, he can be one of the top tier quarterbacks we have in the league. I think there's just certain positions they haven't put him into. And now as we're getting into the playoffs, we're going up against some of the best defenses in the country. We'll see again if they can just keep playing conservatively. Obviously, we've seen Kasari put up some special outings. And with the way Ian Sarniano returns the ball, with the way that guys like Ashton Miller-Melanson, all these guys, you didn't even mention Justin Pace's name, sir. When talking about the best this team has to offer. No, there's certainly a handful to deal with. Again, I think a time's going to come in this playoff series where you're going to have to, go beyond just trying to muddy up the water and have a dogfight. But hey, if anything, Windsor is the best team they could be going up against for this one, because they're not having to worry about an offense that's going to be putting up major points, especially not against that defense. But we'll talk about that game when we get to the quarterfinal preview. For right now, we say job well done by Queens, picking up the win on your homecoming, week 9 homecoming. I don't know what to make of that, but sure, go for it. Love you. And Waterloo, get on that recruiting trail. Have a strong offseason. We'll talk to you soon on the exit meeting series that we'll be doing after the season wraps up. But from there, let's move into our game in the Forest City. The Western Mustangs take out the Windsor Lancers. Final score, Western 46, Windsor 5. Tom, this is where now everyone around the league that's been chagrining at our defensive Windsor is going to look at us and say, okay, can we now say that Windsor isn't legit? Because you know what? I'm still not there with them, because I think when you look at how their defense, 46 obviously is tough. 21 points came in the fourth quarter, though. Okay. So let's be real about that. When this game was well out of reach, Western put it on them. And we highlighted this previewing this week. 2 years ago, it's like Windsor and Western within a field goal going into the fourth quarter. Western drops like 3-4 scores on them in the fourth, something crazy. Last year, Windsor keeps it tight. Western just does that thing to them. That's part of the MO of what's made Western so great, is that even if it looks like you're gonna stay tight with them, they just beat you down so badly that eventually the dam is going to burst. But nonetheless, I think Windsor defensively was doing a strong job, as they do all year, in holding up against that effort. And it kind of goes back to what we just set up talking about Queens going to visit them. Right now, their offense is just not doing enough by any stretch of the imagination to support that defense. And we talked about this with other teams. We were talking about it a lot with McMaster last year, and possibly some of that frustration. And obviously, we're huge fans, and we talk about culture setters of what the Don, Coach JP Cercelli, is doing. And I don't doubt that, especially with someone like Coach Patrick Donovan controlling that defense, they're going to let those attitudes start to boil up. But it does get into that place where you start to wonder, when your defense is so special and your offense, again, a banged up offense. We're still not seeing our guy in Liam Talbot. Wavy Mambo, it's now been pretty much, he's missed half the year. I at this point, I don't know. I haven't checked in on him. I don't think you have either. Maybe it just is like known that he is done, and that's terribly unfortunate if that is the case. Right now, they're not doing enough by any stretch of the imagination to support that defense. And you can say, like, put away any conversation of like, when we're talking about Waterloo not getting the ball going against Queens, Totally fair. Get it. Yeah, we're all in one OUA, but we know that there are levels to this thing. For Windsor, you're playing Western, a team that, again, you're trying to test your mettle against. We loved what you did in that loss to Guelph. We loved what you did despite the loss at Laurier. This one, you just didn't bring it. Defense, I'll still give you a thumbs up for really holding off that attack of the Western Mustangs as long as you could. And I'll let you go through some of the numbers as we get there for Western, but just offensively, I don't know what to say unless, if Talbot and Mambo are back and if Nick Domofsky, like he did last year, is able to come into the playoffs and just put together a really strong outing. As far as the offensive side of the ball, again, I'm not talking about this team as a whole because of all the aspects, the institutional knowledge and just the leadership and how great the defense is. But that offense right now, and we've known this for a little bit, they're banged up, sure, not cutting it.
No, and I think it directly comes for the quarterback play right now. Yes, you can talk about the injuries, Liam Talbot, Wegby Mumbo, those are massive guys to have out. But Danny Skelton, Corson Roy right now are not getting the job done. And I really don't want to throw any kind of shade at these guys by any means because I'm still a massive fan of Danny Skelton and all the things that he's had to get through. But Windsor has been showcasing this ability in this defense as a top tier defense and as a team that's going to start pushing against some of the top tier in the OUA. I mean, you went to a semifinal game against Laurier and we're step for step with them. For you to really take that next step, you look around the league, what's the one thing that you're missing is a top tier quarterback. I think when Nick Domofsky was in the game and when they were doing their thing, especially against Guelph, I saw a lot of really great things that I liked. And I saw some things that you could potentially build off of him. And I saw him throw some nice balls and get some nice things out there. But, yes, it's Western. And my goodness, Western is always so good in the defensive secondary and blah, blah, blah. But if you want to get to where you want to go at some point in time, whether it's the last game that you would play in the OUA or not, roads lead through London. And you're going to have to play the Western Mustangs in all likelihood in London on their home field. And if you can't get the job done there, I don't know what else to tell you, my friends. So when you look at some of the numbers here, I mean, Danny Skelton, 9 for 20, 84 yards and 1 interception with no touchdowns. Corson Roy comes into the game, 2 for 5 on 16 yards. I mean, when you look at that and when you look at some of the things that these teams are doing, that's not the recipe to defeat the Western Mustangs. And yes, Joey Zorn is outstanding, and I will sing Joey Zorn's praises as long as I possibly can because I loved what I saw from him. But if your entire offense is coming from him and you're playing against the Western Mustangs, who every year after year after year knows how to stop the run because that's all they see in practice is pulling guards and pulling tackles and outstanding running backs, how much are you really expecting your run game to really take over against these guys? I mean, Seth Cook comes in there, which is a name that we haven't seen before. 8 attempts for 40 yards. And Joey Zorn, 8 attempts for 36 yards. And Danny Skelton takes off for 21 yards. I mean, that's not what the winning recipe is going to be. And certainly when you look at this, you say, okay, I want to shut down the run game. And I want to shut down as best I can Javoni Cunningham. And if you take those two away with the current iteration that they have here, I don't know that Windsor has enough outside of that to say we can still win football games. And that's really what all of this comes down to. That defense for Windsor, I still have 100% faith in, despite the fact that the amount of points that has been scored against them in the final few games of this season. I still think the world of them. I still think that Devin Verasuk, that Kaladia Moosin, that all of these guys on that defense are still legit. But how well can you consistently play when your offense is continually not scoring points, not holding the ball for sustained drives? That's a lot of pressure to put on a defense, especially when you're going up against, it's just Evan Hillock, 20 for 29, 287 yards. It's Keanu Yazbek going for 76. It's Jerome Rancourt running for 53 and getting 3 touchdowns on the ground as an offensive lineman playing quarterback. You've got Luke Nolan. There's another guy that we haven't seen before for 40 yards. Keon Edwards, Dasani McIntosh, who's been playing fantastic as well. And now you're saying, okay, there's an injury. We haven't seen Seth Robertson. Maybe he's out for a little bit. Oh, shoot. Here's the next guy into Sonny McIntosh. Only 2 catches, but for 75 yards. And you go, well, here's the next guy that we're going to have to worry about. And sure enough, yeah, we'll shut down Mohsen Jamal, or we'll do anything else that we really need to. Oh, Braden Masseri, 7 catches for 94 yards, including one in double coverage. That was one of the nicest catches that I've seen all year. So it's never going to be Western's got somebody injured. Now that part of them is not going to be a part of it at all. It's Western's going to be deep. Western's going to be good. You have to be better. And like you mentioned, this offense just isn't there yet.
I think if you're Windsor, you can take some solace in looking at last year where they go to Laurier in their second last game and they get beat down pretty good, 40-7. And again, it's a combined effort of Skelton and it's Roy. And I don't know last year, again, I don't know if Demoski was hurt at all last year, but how their decision was made or how they moved ultimately to giving Demoski the ball for the playoffs. And again, we have some sense that he's dealing with a hamstring injury. Don't know the full extent of it, but I think you can take some solace in saying you got you got sent out of Laurier Pack and with your tail between your legs. In the regular season, you went back there in about a month's time and you came darn near close to pulling up a pretty solid upset against them and booking your ticket to the Yates Cup. Mm-hmm. So if that's what Nick Demoski gives you, you detailed how nicely he looked against Guelph a few weeks ago and just the things that we've seen from him. You add that into the mix, and if they're getting healthier on the offensive side of the ball beyond just him, but some of these running backs and receiver types that they have out there, again, I think it's too early to be just like, just throwing the baby out with the bathwater with this club. But again, there's certainly things that are frustrating to be able to look at and say, gosh, there's just so much talent. It's just unfortunate it's not all coming together. On the Western side of things, you talked about so many of those great things offensively. I want to stick with the defense to talk about a few things. Number one, this science experiment of putting, man, oh man, that absolute, just tarantula in Richard Adu before at half. There was a play where I think he's lined up against Jalen Miller, who's a solid receiver in his own right, just running a seam route in the end zone. And like a solar eclipse, Miller just disappears underneath the arms of Adu before, and just the physicality he brings. There was a play where Jackson Finley, I don't know if it was Joey Zorn or if it was Christopher John, but someone breaks through the first line past a linebacker, and Finley just fills at about 7 yards past the line of scrimmage, fit tackle, and just takes him down. Just like picture perfect. I need to pull that one to use as a coaching clinic, as being able to say, number one, here's how you play with no fear. And especially when you know how to tackle, you don't have to be fearful, because he fits up beautifully and just takes him down like a championship wrestler or something like that. And we're starting to now see on that defensive line as well. It's been coming along this year, but seeing, guys like, we've seen Soren Halschman have a good year. Max Van Muhldorfer has been really consistent. Malcolm Frazier, now that he's back there healthy, it seemed like he missed a bit of time. Obviously, we love shouting out our guy in Marcus Robinson. We know what the linebacking core is doing. But in the same way that kind of looking at with that Ottawa defense, that front line maybe hasn't been the star of the show. Even on that end, they're really putting together some good outings now, and against good offensive lines, because we certainly know Windsor has that. It's just like, again, I go back to some of the commentary we were talking going into this week, where it's like Western is like, maybe I'm just like, it's stuck in my head, this idea that were we sleeping on Western? Are we sleeping on Western? Because they are so bloody scary, and it sounds weird to have to sound the alarm on that because it's the Western Mustangs. But in a year that's been all about the Laurier Golden Hawks, just like, again, folks, remember, I don't care who's getting the first round bye. This team is so sharp right now, and again, the offense is outstanding, but to me, it's looking at this defense. And Ryan, I think I was mispronouncing his name, Ryan Bartleson, another major interception with a solid return on it. Obviously, we saw him with the pick six against Mac. And in the same way that you're looking at some of those guys on the offensive side of the ball, like a Dasani McIntosh, who's so explosive, and looking at a guy in Bartleson and just being like, great. Another one. Cool. Good job, Western. Where'd you get this guy from? Right. It's so disgusting. Hillock, 20 for 29, 287, no touchdowns, no interceptions. But like it's just doing what he needs to get done. It's such like, it's a I feel like in some parts a low hanging fruit to say like, well, they're kind of like the Bill Belichick, Tom Brady like era New England Patriots, like this kind of like do your job mentality. But it really does kind of feel like that sometimes when it's like they don't need to be the flashiest, the splashiest. They're just gonna go to work, bring their lunch pail and their hard hat, and just get it done. It's spectacular to watch. And we've obviously seen Laurier get the best of them. We've seen some other teams give them good matchups, which going back to some of the commentary to start the episode and thinking about offensive performances from quarterbacks that we've seen in years gone by and how we don't see like quite as many, but we still feel like the talent's just there. I think it speaks to that Western's still bloody good. I think the rest of the OUA is getting better, but the fact that they are still this good with the rest of the OUA getting better means that they're that much better themselves. I'm not, this is why, again, to all the folks that think we don't talk about Western enough, we don't talk about Western that much because this is what it just turns into. Because what do you want? Us to just talk about how darn good they are? Like we can go through more of the details if you want to. Again, Keanu Yazbek, really nice game for him in the mix. And Keon Edwards, like, they're great. Windsor, figured out offensively. Tom, I don't know. Anything else you want to talk about with this one?
Yeah, I mean, Western is playing arguably some of the best football that we've seen even from the past couple of years. And I think that idea of Laurier winning and kind of poking the bear here, I think it's something that we certainly need to look at. Not to say that, everybody else, oh my goodness, Western is coming. Of course, Western is that good. They're always that good. It's been how many years since they went in a two-loss season? I think since back in 2014, I think was the last time we looked at that. When was the last time that they had three losses in a single season? It's way before that as well. So it's not like Western is not nobody's going into a Western game being like, oh, this is going to be easy. Western is outstanding in all facets of this game. Even in a first-year player like Roman Campanero in the kick return game, we've seen him take some back and do some things. So I'm really excited about what this Western squad is building towards and playing some outstanding football. And it's, you mentioned it earlier. It feels like every single play that Jackson Finley is in could be used as teach tape because of how well his fundamentals are, the speed in which he's making these reads and decisions, and his form tackling is off the freaking charts, whether he's on special teams or on defense. Like, this young man is so exciting to watch anytime you get a chance to actually see him play. It's been outstanding football that they have been playing ever since that Laurier game. So Western is coming on at the perfect time. Not to say that they were ever off, but they're getting better and building towards something at the perfect time here. Windsor, you've went through the regular season. You were 5-0 at one point. You took care of business against Queens for sure, but you played against Western, you played against Laurier, and now you're getting a sense of if you really want to get to where you want to go, this is the level. This is the expectation here. Can you do that this year? Can you get to that level with the pieces that you have, or are you waiting on guys to get back and healthy? Because this is what it takes to win a Yates Cup. You have to beat those teams. There's not a lot of teams out there that can do that, and I say that across the country, but now there's no questions, there's no anything. This is the standard of what it means to be a Yates Cup champion. Yeah. Either get there or you won't.
Yeah, and honestly, like I still contend that, like you said that they've been playing so well since Laurier. They didn't play poorly against Laurier. Laurier played a perfect, like as close to a perfect game of football, and Western just didn't keep up. It's rare to see. So again, like we measure these teams with different meter sticks, yardsticks, rulers. I don't know. The metaphor is lost on me. Surprise, surprise. But it's just, again, the excellence by which we judge them, that like any loss is going to sound like a lackluster appearance. Again, go through that game tape. Yeah, a few odd mess ups here and there we don't expect from them, but the numbers still jump off the charts, right? They're playing a top team in Laurier. Sorry, is this the part now where we talk about a tied for first in U Sports Laurie Goldenhawk team.
Oh
What the heck is this, Tom?
God, for those of you who haven't seen it, obviously U Sports every week, especially in the regular season, will come out with a top 10 list. And they're always controversial, obviously, because teams are advocating for their team and whatever else. But this is the first year, the first time in any memory that I have, where not just one instance, but two, where teams are tied in their positions, which is such a cop out, and it is frankly in my mind just crap. Just pick the team who you think is better and allow everybody else to make the decisions. In this iteration, I don't know if this was a typo. I have to assume that it's not because it's still up as far as I can tell. Montreal and Laurier tied for first, and Western and Laval tied for third. Uh, what is that? You can't be doing that. Come on now.
And it's, and you can read into it like as much as you want to as well, because it's tied for first, but it's Montreal Laurier, right? And then
Yeah.
isn't it Laval and then Western? So again, it's like, why'd you order it like that? It's, I don't know. It's like, that's obviously me being like really into the tea leaves and whatever. But yeah, come on, just pick one. Like, what was it? It was like, was it just equal voting and you didn't have a tie break scenario for these guys? Like, I don't know. It's just, anyways. Whether they're the best team, I guess these teams are the top, whatever. I don't know what to make of it. Again, hey, Windsor, let's get it together. Let's see who's going to be starting for you at quarterback when you host the Golden Gales from Alumni Stadium under the Golden Arches. For Western, hey, keep doing your thing. You get McMaster coming into your barn. Again, a team that's going to test you in certain aspects. We certainly know that where Mac has their strong suits, and it'll be a great ability for them to get ready for this playoff drive that they're certainly looking to go on. Tom, we good to move on to our final game?
I'd say so.
Well, let's do it. Then we head back to the nation's capital, where we see the Carleton Ravens fall to those tied for first in U Sports Laurier Golden Hawks. Final score: Laurier 44, Carleton 24. Tom, I think based on how things broke down, if Carleton pulled off this win with the other games working out the way they did, they still would have missed the playoffs because let's not open up that can of worms. I think they may have still missed it because of Mac winning and the numbers they won and the three-way tie with Mac and Carleton and York. Besides the point, obviously, if you're Carleton, it starts by picking up this win. You let everyone else take care of business. And, again, we've been saying this all year long, from them being like the best 0-2 team to the best 1-3 team to the best this, that, and the third. Once we get into the offseason, we'll have some time to go through some of the historical stuff, maybe some points of comparison. I feel pretty confident this has to be the best 2-6 team I can ever think we have seen. Because again, this is a game where, much like Carleton has been doing against some of the other top teams in the league, playoff teams left, right, and center, they are absolutely in this game on the back of a solid defense and an explosive offense that is led by this young kid, Elijah Barnes, who goes 23 for 35, 408 yards passing, and 2 touchdowns, 1 interception on the day. Obviously, we've seen we know the names he's getting the ball to. Obviously, Tristan Reddy, Kasim Ferdinand, Frederick Hatchie has himself a day, 142, 2 touchdowns. Obviously, the long of 97 is going to help those numbers. A young guy in Derek Yaboa, seeing him do his thing. Also starting to see the run game come alive for this team in Joey Marcato, in Matthew Morin. Not seeing the young kid in Keyshawn Reed get any carries, but we know that he's explosive. Ethan Roca has shown some really good things. It's just, I guess it's sports. Maybe I'm just becoming a little bit sentimental in my old age of just being like, it's just unfair. It's unfair. How does this Carleton team not get a chance to go into the playoffs? And I'm certain, and we'll obviously talk about Laurier. We're going to get there. Relax, Golden Hawks fans. We know you're listening, and we appreciate you for doing so. We know Coach Grant is going to look at all that and be like, it doesn't matter. We lost those games. Did we get better by a variety of metrics? Sure, we can look at that. At the end of the day, we didn't make playoffs. It doesn't matter what some folks want to say on a podcast about how good they think we are. You are what your record is. We come to the end of the season. Sorry, you didn't make the playoffs. It's bloody unfair. I mean, I know that doesn't matter a lick and it doesn't even make any sense. It just, It's out of all these teams, because I guess it's the last team now. We're saying, salute to you. Good luck in the offseason. See you next year. Obviously, so much great things going on about York with Waterloo, U of T, looking at those positives. Without a doubt, this is the deadliest non-playoff team we have. And I'm willing to bet that obviously we don't follow, I don't follow U Sports, the other conferences as much as other people. I'm willing to bet this Carleton Ravens team can take a shot at some other playoff teams from other conferences across the country.
I don't think that that's a hot take at all if you've been following Carleton Raven football. I mean, Elijah Barnes going for 408 yards against the Laurier Golden Hawk defense is nothing to sneeze at. I wonder if Carleton, I wonder how much of it is outstanding play versus exposing a couple of things defensively, or a combination between the two, because you read off Frederick Hatchie's numbers, 142 yards receiving with 2 touchdowns on 3 catches. That's outstanding for sure. But then Kasim Ferdinand, 7 catches for 119 yards. Tristan Reddy, 5 catches for 74 yards. Derek Yerboa for 37 yards. So passing game that really, really exploded in this one. And I don't know. Once again, it's a little, some of these numbers are a little funky because they have Elijah Barnes rushing 5 attempts for negative 65 yards. I'm not quite sure how that happened. And also total offense, 433 for Carleton. Net yards passing, 408. Net yards rushing, 33. Those numbers don't add up. So little bit of something going on there. Anyways, when you look at this Carleton Ravens squad, absolutely you say, my goodness, how good they were, how much potential this young man in Elijah Barnes has as a second-year player, and the sky's the limit for him and everything for sure. But as Carleton Raven fans, are you a little upset because we've done the research into this in the past number of years? They have yet to beat a team with a winning record. And once again, that is the same case with this year. Even in the year that they finished 5-3, the best team that they beat against was at a 500 level come the season end. So there's at some point in time, I'm sure the Raven faithful are watching these games saying, when are we going to start winning these close games? When are you going to start beating the McMaster team that won by 2 points, albeit you had the opportunity? Kasim Ferdinand was open in the last play, was just a little bit overthrown for sure. And when you look at all of these games, there's a couple of things here and there, but you at some point in time, you have to get over that hurdle. You have to start winning those, once again, we call them jump ball moments, where you need something to come up here, or when you're in the Panda game and for some reason that you run on the clock for a super long time.
Yeah.
You don't seem to have a sense of urgency going into certain areas. And so there's things that are happening with this Carleton squad where for a number of years, you and I have looked at the talent that's there going, oh my God, look at how good they are, but they're not translating in the record. And so I don't know, as somebody watching them, and I'm very curious to think, what are some of the Ravens fans thinking when they see this team? Because once again, 408 yards passing is outstanding, and that's amazing for Elijah Barnes. But I guarantee you he'd trade all of those passing yards for a few more wins to get a chance in the playoffs. So a little give and take there before we get into the entirety of this game, I guess.
Yeah, no, you're right. And maybe it's in part like they are a young team, especially like with the quarterback they have in there, and they have obviously great veteran leadership, guys like Ife Onyeka, Kasim Ferdinand's kind of becoming that veteran presence on that offense now. Lavoie on the offensive line. No doubt veteran pieces across that, and Braun across that team in general. But I mean, Tom, they lose 3 of their games. They lose by a combined 8 points. And so like, where does that, where do you nitpick that, whether we want to say, as you highlighted, bringing up those jump ball moments, those 50-50 games, we had them in that step up or step off tier. And I don't know, like where I even put them right now. They're just a team where, again, we go back to that Guelph game, and I think you were mentioning it, that if Elijah starts that game, probably doesn't change the outcome of it, all things considered. But like that was a game where Yeah, they're looking really sharp in that one throughout it against Guelph. Like even that one's a bit closer than what the record frankly shows in that one. The Western game's closer than what the final score shows in that one. And as we're going into more detail, this Laurier game was super close as well. Like I know that's like a really like slippery slope argument of me being like 2-6, or were they really 8-0? I don't know. You tell me. Like obviously you are what your record is, but it's like I don't know. Maybe we'll be able to be privileged by getting someone like Coach Gray on the podcast and go through these things, or someone else from the Carleton community. As you were talking about a fan, it was great having Taryn DeYoung on the broadcast. Yes. That was super cool. But it's good. I'm left, I guess, similarly with you. But at the end of the day, it's just like, but the talent is clearly there to be in these games. That thing that takes you beyond is hard to quantify. And until you do it, it's like, yeah. Sorry.
Most definitely. And I completely agree with you. But when you look year after year after year, last year, they lose to Laurier 20-15. They lose to Western 31-21 when they're in both of those games. They lose to Ottawa in the Panda game 18-16. They lose to Queens 35-16. They're in those games. There's never a game where they get blown out by any means. And it's happened. You could go back for it year after year after year. And I don't know, once again, like you mentioned, it's very hard to quantify what that it factor is to get over the hump here for sure. But whatever that is, they haven't had it in the past number of years here. And it's a shame. It really is, because like you mentioned, when you watch this Carleton squad and you see some of the games that they're playing and you're going, oh my goodness, Elijah Barnes, Frederick Hatchie, Tristan Reddy. Oh my goodness. And you don't even mention your last year All-Canadian Kasim Ferdinand, and he's been playing outstanding. So absolutely, they've got so many outstanding pieces and players. How is that not translating? And absolutely, we're kind of getting into an exit meeting here more than we are recapping the game.
Sorry, Laurie.
Yeah, but it's something that I really would like to dive into at a certain point, and we will get to it at a later pod. But so much talent. It's a shame that you finished 2-6 and missed the playoffs.
It is like, again, I guess last thing on this, we'll talk about it more when we do the exit meeting. You look at the teams that finished ahead of them. Mac, I'll take Carleton. I don't care that they lost them. I'll take Carleton. Windsor, I might be taking Carleton right now. In those two, in amongst those teams right now. Ottawa, obviously, those are a toss-up team. Queens, probably still taking Queens in that one. That defense is just so darn good. That rushing attack, but it's like, it's that classic thing of like it's so weird. It's like we always talk about this thing of the eye test versus the numbers. By both the eye test and the numbers, this team is outstanding. But the numbers ultimately that matter the most are the ones that happen to fall under either a W or an L. By everything else, the math's not mathing. So yes, we'll spend time at a later date to be able to find out what is it between the margins that we are missing. Because we love you, Carleton. Laurier. We talked about the day Ethan Jordan had already. And of course, he's not doing that on his own. Taylor Elgersma is getting him the ball. 29 completions on 37 attempts, 464, 4 touchdowns, 1 interception. Taryn Elms getting 68 on the ground, and going alongside Ethan Jordan is Raiden Thorne with 7 catches, Jace Atkinson with 4, Jackson Stebbings with 3. Our guy Laomi Ojatalayo picking up the touchdown. Ryan Spite getting a touchdown as well on his only reception. Dawson Hodge kicking the ball as sharp as ever, and this one scoring 14 points on his own, and the defense looking really sharp. That's secondary. Again, I think we were called out for maybe not highlighting just how special they are. Obviously, so exciting when we saw that Dhaliwal was going there, but with Jahari Hastings, with Malik Cote, man, oh man, is that ever a special defense? And we know some of the other guys. Again, it's in that territory now, like with Western, where it's like you look for the angles to make it more than like, let's talk about the great team doing great stuff as they do. But in so many ways, it's really that special. They were firing on all cylinders. Elgersma, we were joking about like how long is it? How much of the game will he play? Does he play all of it? I mean, 37 attempts in this one. Darn, obviously they were wanting him to go out there and do his thing. Just a spectacular day on the field for the Golden Hawks.
Yeah, and I think this goes right into what you and I were talking about when you talk about what defines you, who are you as a team? Having Taylor Elgersma play for 3 quarters, go for 464 yards on 37 attempts in a game that in the long run didn't really mean anything to them. They already had first place locked up, but they wanted that 8-0, that perfect record. That 100%, in my opinion, speaks to who Laurier is this year about that. This is what we are. This is what we want. We want a win against Western in the regular season. We got that. We want to be perfect in the regular season. We got that. This is a team of want and finally having the capabilities on all facets to really make that happen. And I love to see the production that we've seen against these guys. And once again, Ethan Jordan having one of the greatest regular seasons that a receiver has since another Laurier receiver had in Curly Gittens Jr. It's really been just amazing because once again, we've talked about this previously. Raiden Thorne has the capabilities to be an All-Canadian, and Laomi Ojotolayo, Jace Atkinson, Ryan Spate, all of these guys have the same. I won't say the same, but they have capabilities to be great. It's just they've got a guy, and if there is ever a U Sports Hall of Fame, and that's something, another segment, a little sneak preview of something that we're cooking up. Ethan Jordan's in it.
First ballot. Yeah.
One of the best receivers that we've seen in so long. And his route running, his catching abilities, and what he's been able to do. And I think most importantly out of all of that, the chemistry between him and Taylor Elgersma. It just seems that Taylor, he could go through all of his reads, and even if everyone's covered, well, shoot, I'll just throw it up to EJ and see if he can come down with one. So it's just this Laurier offense, when you look at all of the different units that are out there offensively and defensively, this Laurier offense is operating at the very highest across the entire league, not just the OUA, but in all of U Sports. And to watch them play is something really, really fantastic. But once again, I don't want to super harp on it because this was a win and this was a convincing win. But 408 yards by Elijah Barnes, and having guys like Frederick Hatchie and Kasim Ferdinand go over 100 yards receiving, that's something that if you want to really make sure that you're going to be competing in all of these late games, just look for it. Not, once again, we talked about it. It's not everything. It's not nothing, but it's something.
Yeah. No, I as it usually does, fall somewhere in the middle. And, man, just I'm more so inclined to just chalk that up to Elijah having just the day of days for him, which just, again, as a young quarterback in this position to be able to do that is so special. And you talk about the connection that Taylor has with his receivers, and it's not new news by any stretch of the imagination. But the first two scoring drives Laurier puts together, the first one being the touchdown to Spate, and then the following one being Dawson Hodge adding the 3. Both drives were Laurier starting in their own end, and in the first drive for them, which ends up in the touchdown, they hand the ball off once to Tanner Nelms, who picks up 4 yards. Drive starts on their own 33, ends up in the Carleton end zone. The following one, where they end up getting the 3 from Dawson Hodge, they start on their own 30. They hand it to Tayshawn Jackson once for 7. They hand it to Nelms for once to get a single yard. Other than that, roughly 9 plays from scrimmage, they are passing the ball. And so even when they come out and they're going to say, guess what, here's what we're going to do, kind of in the classic style of, again, the way that we joke about Western for years, of being like, okay, guess what, we're running power to the right, okay, try and stop us now, where you can just know that, okay, they're just in their groove. It's Taylor just spinning the ball to everyone left, right, and center. And it's Jace Atkinson on the first. It's Raiden Thorne. It's Tuda Stebbings. It's Ethan Jordan. It's Thorne. They end up settling for the field goal ultimately. And just, again, being able to just hone in on any aspect of this offense is such a tough task. And that's why, again, I go back to that game with Western, where it wasn't really that Western played poorly, but it's that this offense is so sharp right now that it's darn near impossible. It's like the only way to beat them, it feels like, is that the only way to beat them is to outscore them. I mean, obviously, duh, you have to outscore your opponent to beat anyone, you idiot Zach. But from the standpoint of they're not going to stop scoring when they get the ball. So you better, it's the class thing we used to always talk about with Western. You can't settle for threes instead of sevens, or let alone punt the ball away, right? So it's just that standpoint. Your defense, good luck. You could slow them down a little bit if you can, but it's just going to have to be trading haymakers with this team right now. And they're sharp. They're going to get rested. Man, oh man, whomever comes out of that Queens and Windsor game, I mean, man, oh man, what a matchup that's going to be for that second round game. Tom, I don't know what else you have on this one. I think I'm done the commentary I want to speak on.
Yeah, I mean, I feels like there's not enough great things that we could potentially say about this offense. The one thing that I will say, and that you and I were kind of talking about, it seems like our guy in Dawson Hodge has gotten back to form, finally getting back into the kicking groove of things. He was a little bit not himself, let's say, last year, but 3 for 4 in field goals, 5 for 5 out of extra points, totaling 14 points in this one. I'm thinking it's pretty safe to say that he is back here. So that was obviously awesome to see. Tayshaun Jackson is still a very big threat. And in the words of Jack Moore, he thinks that Tayshaun Jackson is more of a threat to teams as a punt return, kick return specialist than Curly thing to say when you think of Curly Gittens and what he was able to do, but teams just seem to be kicking the ball the hell away from Tayshaun Jackson because he's got such an ability to return the ball.
Tom, I'm just gonna you glitched out there for a half a second. Maybe it was me. I don't know who's going on there, but I caught enough of what you're trying to say there that I don't want it to be missed out from the pod. Please say again what you were quoting Jack Moore on in talking about how special Tayshaun Jackson is as a return guy.
According to Jack Moore, and certainly his thoughts, but we can see it when you watch the games here and you go back and forth, teams seem to be more afraid of Tayshaun Jackson as a returner than they were of Curly Gittens Jr., which is an insane thing to think about. But you see all of these teams in the punt game and kickoffs, and they are kicking the hell away from Tayshaun as a rookie, either a first or a second year kid. I'm sorry, I'd have to do a double check on that. But what this kid's ability to cut on a dime, to take off, in the speed that he has and the vision, it's just all outstanding. Once again, we talk about a bright future. It's got to be this kid.
It most certainly is. And he's having such a special year for them. And again, you can play that card of when you have all these weapons, do you get lost in the mix and then you're the fifth guy the other team's preparing for? Or do you just say, man, he makes that offense that much more special? Whichever way you want to spin it, the numbers are what the numbers are for what he's been doing. And again, the athleticism, the ball vision is so spectacular. And I love that comment from you coming from Jack Moore, because obviously he knows pretty intimately just how special Curly was for those Laurie Golden Hawks. Obviously tune into CFL game any now and then, and you'll see what he's still doing at the next level. Tom, that's a wrap on our regular season for the 2024 OUA season. Again, we'll say salute to the Carleton Ravens there. We'll talk to you about you soon in an exit meeting to come. Laurie, enjoy your well-earned bye week and rest that comes with it. But Tom, again, that's the end of our 2024 season. It's been a spectacular year. You've mentioned this a few times. We'd have to go back through the memory banks. I can't think of a year where there was truly so much excitement week in, week out. Not to say that every game was a no-doubter, but there was something that you were taking away, some matchup, some aspect that then played into a coming matchup or a matchup to come that had us on the edge of our seats, just looking forward to the next game and the next game. And now those next games become that much more important because it's win or go home time, it's playoffs, and it's going to be a battle, a bloodbath, if you will, to determine who our Yates Cup champion is going to be for this season. Tom, final thoughts on week 9, final thoughts on the 2024 regular season.
I mean, we've mentioned it so many times. I don't want to keep harping on it, but my goodness, what a season we had. It was so outstanding to see such fantastic play from top to bottom across the OUA and see so many exciting games throughout the entire time. Obviously, thankful for every second that I have working with you and watching these games with you, my guy. It's been fantastic. But I'm not going to lie to you. Earlier today, I was kind of scrolling through Instagram and looking at a few things and saw a post from our guy in Michael Lightbody saying, "Thank you, football. I'm all done." And
No.
just kind of hit me right in the heartstrings and pulling on that. And you start thinking about all of these amazing players that you and I have loved to watch. And some of their seasons, some of their careers are coming to an end here. And it's heartbreaking at times. And that even though we've got not probably, absolutely our best football from a fan's perspective to watch in the weeks to come. Thinking about some of these players who have given their heart and soul for their entire football careers, and it's been such a pleasure to watch. I feel for you. Obviously, Zach and I were in your shoes at one point in time when our careers came to an end. Don't be sad because it's over. Smile because it happened, my friends. It was a privilege and a pleasure to watch each and every one of you.
And if you ever want to share your story of your experiences playing football, we will have you on the podcast anytime. Name the place, the time. We will get you on and talk about what made you great and what made you contribute, the ways you contributed to the OUA to make it the best conference in U Sports going right now. Tom, that's a wrap on week 9. That's a wrap on the regular season. Thank you to everyone that's tuned in to follow along the season with us this whole year. It means the world to us, and we appreciate the feedback. We appreciate all the awesome people we got to connect with at all the games. Shout out to Sanjeev Lal getting to finally meet you at the York Mac game. That was amazing. Finally, after so many online interactions. Shout out to all the people that engaged us via online. Shout out to, again, all the student athletes, the coaches, the athletic therapists, the support staffs, everyone that keeps these teams afloat and puts out, as we've been detailing, some of the best football we've seen 1 through 11, possibly in our years following and playing the game. It makes it such a pleasure. It makes it such an honor that we get to do what we get to do. And thankfully, though the regular season has come to an end, the journey is just beginning now as we get ready for the sprint to the Yates Cup. 3 weeks away, and then national playoffs to come after that. We'll be setting up the quarterfinals for you right here later this week at the 55.